The Mafia boss was surrounded by gunmen until the waitress grabbed his gun and fired first. The rain didn't just fall, it attacked. It hammered the frosted glass of La Meridienne, a place you only found if you already knew it existed. Outside, the neon sign of the closed tailor shop above bled red and blue into the alley puddles, the colors swirling like hot, chemical oil on the black water of Port Providence. This was the Atlantic coast, but it felt like the edge of the world. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, expensive whiskey, and the low, mournful complaint of a tenor sax, Riley Jenkins, 27 years old and on her second double of the week, moved between the VIP tables, her gray eyes, calm as a seawall before a nor'easter, registered everything and revealed nothing. She carried a tray of empty highball glasses, her steps perfectly in time with the drummer's brushwork, a ghost in a crisp white apron. She was working class, born from the salt and rust of the docks, and she knew the difference between quiet money and loud trouble. The corner booth, shrouded in heavy black velvet curtains, was the club's apex. Adrian Kovarik sat there, 33, though he looked older in the dim light, his face carved from sharp angles and shadows. He was the head of the Kovarik Consortium, a name that meant logistics and shipping to the city council, but meant control of every loading bay and container yard to the men who worked the night shift. He was flanked by two men who weren't just bodyguards. They were architecture, human walls and tailored suits. Riley was clearing the adjacent table when her dockside instincts flared, a cold prickle on her neck. 3 tables over, near the fire exit, 3 new diners. They hadn't ordered a drink. They hadn't checked their coats, which were still dark and heavy with rain. Their shoes were soft-soled, built for silence, not for style. And their eyes, they weren't watching the band or their phones. They were scanning. One watched the bar, one watched the front door, and the third watched Adrian Kovarik. Riley's breath hitched, but her expression never changed. She turned toward the bar, a smooth, practiced pivot. The ceiling lights flickered once, twice, then dimmed just a fraction. The saxophone player, sensing the shift in the room's pressure, let his note slide into an uneasy quiet. The back service door exploded open. It wasn't a bang, just the splintering of a lock and the hard slam of wood against the kitchen wall. 4 men. They moved in a professional, fanned-out formation, spreading like an oil slick to cut off the exits. They were the Ferrum Ring, rivals who thought Kovarik's control of the ports was a prize to be taken, not a territory to be respected. Black metal muzzles appeared from beneath their long coats. Time snapped. The music died in a strangled brass sigh. Adrian's right-hand guard was already moving, his hand diving inside his jacket as he lunged to pull his boss down. He was too slow. The first shot was a flat, ugly crack that punched through the velvet curtain. The big man's grunt was lost as he collapsed forward, a dead weight. Screams erupted from the other tables. Glass shattered. Riley didn't scream. She moved, dropping low and fast, sliding behind the solid oak of the bar, just as a second man fell Adrian's left guard, who had managed to get his weapon out before 2 rounds hit his chest. He crashed against the bar back, his momentum sliding his sidearm across the slick floor tiles. Riley's hand, reaching out to brace her fall, landed directly on the guard's weapon. The metal was still warm. She risked a look. Through the service gap, the pass-through window where she picked up her orders, she saw him. Adrian Kovarik was pinned. His back was to the plush wall of the booth, the dead end of the corner, the leader of the hit squad, a man with a jagged scar bisecting his eyebrow, was advancing. He raised his pistol, taking his time, savoring the kill. There was no thought. There was only instinct, the instinct of a survivor. Riley vaulted up, not over the bar, but through the service window. Her left hand gripped the steel ledge for balance, her right hand not reaching for the dropped gun on the floor, but snatching forward. Adrian, seeing the sudden motion, didn't flinch. Her fingers closed around the butt of the gun holstered under Adrian's own arm. She yanked the heavy pistol free from his shoulder rig as she cleared the window. She was airborne for a fraction of a second. She landed, pivoted on one foot, and her arms snapped straight. Riley Jenkins fired first. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet cut a clean line across the smoky room. It didn't hit the man. It hit his gun. The impact was violent, a spray of sparks and metal as the leader's weapon was ripped from his grasp, clattering uselessly against the far wall. A single, stunned heartbeat of silence fell. The scarred man stared at his empty, stinging hand. In that heartbeat, Adrian moved. He didn't reach for another weapon. He spun, grabbing Riley around the waist, his entire body becoming a shield for hers. He hauled her down behind the overturned bulk of a heavy mahogany table, pulling them both out of the line of fire. His hand clamped over her mouth. Not hard, but firm. He put his lips to her ear, his other hand raised, signaling for absolute silence. Outside, a new sound began to slice through the rain, the distant rising wail of Coastal Integrity Bureau sirens, the sound of official trouble. The remaining Ferrum Ring men looked at their leader, then at the door. The moment was broken. They dissolved, vanishing back out the service door like the shadows they were. The room was chaos, crying, shouting, the smell of cordite. Adrian released his hand from Riley's mouth, but his grip tightened on her wrist. The sirens were closer now, almost on them. His voice was a low, rough whisper, a vibration against her skin, meant for her and her alone. From this moment, Adrian Kovarik said, his dark eyes locked on hers, you are no longer an outsider. The kitchen of La Meridienne was a world away from the velvet-draped club. Here, the only light was the flat, sterile white of fluorescent tubes humming overhead. It made the stainless steel counters look like morgue tables. The air smelled of sour beer and bleach. Riley sat on a metal stool, her hands resting on her knees to keep them from shaking. The adrenaline from the club floor had faded, leaving a cold, metallic residue in her mouth. Agent Tamsin Vale did not sit. She stood, leaning lightly against a prep counter, a picture of federal polish in a city built on grime. She was from the Federal Commercial Crimes Office, the FCCO, and her smile was a precise, bloodless incision. It never reached her eyes. That was quite a shot. Miss Jenkins, Vale began, her voice as smooth as the steel, almost professional. You fire guns often. I grew up in the Dockview ward, Riley said, her voice flat. You learn things. I'm sure. Vale tapped a pen against a small notepad. Let's talk about your mother, Eleanor Jenkins. She was a port accountant for 10 years. Right up until the financing scandal that saw 2 city officials indicted, she was the star witness. Then, she wasn't a tragic accident, the file says. Riley's jaw tightened. My mother is dead. What does she have to do with this? She knew the books. She knew where every container, every administrative fee, and every ghost manifest went, Vale said, walking a slow circle around Riley. And now, her daughter, a waitress, just happens to be in the perfect position to save the life of Adrian Kovarik, the man who essentially inherited that entire system. You must admit, the optics are convenient. I saw a man about to be shot. I acted. You didn't just act. You disarmed the shooter. You grabbed Kovarik's personal weapon. That's not instinct. Miss Jenkins, that's a choreographed move. Vale leaned in, her voice dropping. Was this whole thing staged? A message from Kovarik to his rivals? Are you on his payroll? Before Riley could answer, a shadow fell across the doorway. The fluorescent lights seemed to flicker, overpowered by the sudden presence. Adrian Kovarik stood framed in the opening, his suit immaculate despite the chaos. He didn't look at Vale. His eyes were fixed on Riley. Agent Vale, he said, and the name was a dismissal. The temperature in the room dropped. You're in my kitchen, and you're questioning my employee without counsel. Vale straightened, her professional smile thinning. This is an active crime scene, Mr. Kovarik, and Miss Jenkins is a material witness to an attempted murder. She is. Adrian agreed. Taking a step into the room, the kitchen suddenly felt tiny. A box, he commanded. Which is why my lawyer is meeting her downstairs. He will handle all her future statements. He turned his gaze to Riley, and it was not a question. We're leaving. Vale's expression hardened, but she knew she had lost the room. This wasn't her jurisdiction. Not really. She was FCCO. The gunplay was just a messy appetizer. The real meal was the port, and Kovarik owned the table. She slid a business card from her jacket pocket and placed it on the counter next to Riley. "They'll own you for this, Riley," Vale said, her voice low and urgent. "That shot wasn't a rescue, it was a down payment. When they demand you repay the favor, and they will. You call me." Adrian escorted Riley out the back service door, the one the gunman had used. The alley was quiet now, the rain reduced to a fine mist that hung in the air. The smell of the Atlantic, sharp with salt and the diesel fumes of a distant freighter, washed over them. "I promised you a safe ride home," Adrian said. His voice was different now, the hard edges sanded down, though the steel remained underneath. Just that, no obligation. Riley looked at the black sedan idling at the end of the alley, its engine a low, powerful thrum. She saw the two men inside, more walls and suits. She shook her head. "I'll take the bus. I don't want an escort." He studied her for a moment, a flicker of something surprise, perhaps respect in his eyes. He didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his pocket and produced a slim, black phone. It was heavy, featureless. "Take this, then. It's temporary. The ID is hidden. Keep it on." She took it. The metal was cold. "One more thing," he added, his hand on the alley door. "If you see a dark-paneled van with no plates, do not stop. Do not go home. Just run and use that phone." He was gone before she could reply. The bus ride was a blur. She made it back to her attic apartment in the old Dockview building, the one that always smelled of damp plaster and her neighbor's curry. She locked the 3 deadbolts. Her hands were finally, violently, shaking. On her refrigerator, held by a chipped magnet, was a photograph. Her mother, 20 years younger, squinting into the sun on a pier, her arm around a 10-year-old Riley. She traced the faded outline of her mother's face. She remembered the nights. Her mother at this same small kitchen table, buried in shipping ledgers she'd brought home, a calculator clicking under the single bare bulb, whispering to herself about invoices that didn't match, about names that never get written down. The new phone vibrated on the counter, a harsh, buzzing sound. She picked it up. A new message from an unknown number. "Your shot ruined the plan. Aim better next time. C.L." Cassius Leone, the scarred man from the club, her blood ran cold. Ruined the plan. The phone immediately rang. She stared at the blank screen, then answered. "Don't delete that message." It was Vale. The agent's voice was sharp, urgent. "They're testing you. That's our way in. This is how we get inside their circle." Riley was about to hang up when a flicker of red light danced across the wall. She froze. A tiny, perfect circle of red laser light. It moved from the wall, crawled over the back of her cheap sofa, and settled on the glass of water sitting on her coffee table. It held there for 3 seconds, a precise, crimson dot. Then it was gone. It wasn't an assassination. It was a message. "We know where you sleep." Riley stood in the center of her small room, caught between 3 forces. Cassius, who wanted her dead, Vale, who wanted to use her, and Adrian, who wanted... what? She looked at the phone. She thought of her mother, of the ledgers, of the names never written down. She thought of the red dot on her water glass. Running was not an option. Running was what they expected. She opened the text chain with the single, saved number Adrian's. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She accepted the price. Being protected meant being seen. Being an outsider was safe. She was no longer an outsider. She typed 1 word and hit send. Okay, the Lampworks was not a headquarters. It was a tomb of industry, a massive brick warehouse in the oldest, darkest artery of Port Providence, The original sign, long dead, still hung over the reinforced steel doors. Inside, it was a cavern of exposed brick, iron support beams thick as ancient trees, and floors of scarred concrete. Modernity had been forced upon it, soundproof. Reinforced glass looked out onto the churning gray water, and a state-of-the-art operations pit glowed in the center, casting long, Gothic shadows up into the raftered darkness. The air smelled of damp stone, ozone from the servers, and relentlessly strong coffee. Riley Jenkins arrived just after 2 a.m, her cheap raincoat dripping a puddle onto the polished floor. She was a small, sodden figure in the immense space. A woman emerged from the pool of light. She was tall, dressed in a severe black pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a knot that looked painfully tight. This was Sarah Halden, Adrian's strategic advisor. Her voice was low and precise, devoid of any welcoming warmth. "Miss Jenkins, you're late, but you're here. Let us establish the rules of your new life." Sarah did not offer a seat. "1, your apartment in Dockview is compromised. You will not return. You live here now. 2, your digital presence is being erased. No social media, no unsecured email. You will use the device Meister, Kavarik provided, and only that device. 3, you adhere to all security protocols. No door remains unlocked. You are never in a room without a confirmed secondary exit. You are, as of last night, a high-value asset and a primary target. Your survival depends on your invisibility." Another man joined them, moving with a silent, heavy tread. Bogdan Petrescu, head of security. He was built like the iron beams holding the roof up, and his face was a map of old scars. He regarded Riley with flat, assessing eyes. "She needs to be tested," Bogdan stated. His voice was a gravelly rumble. Before Riley could ask what he meant, the main breakers clicked, the operations pit, the overhead lights. Every source of illumination vanished. The blackness was absolute, suffocating. It was broken only by the faint red glow of the emergency exit signs 60 yards away. Then came the sound. It was an audio recording, blasted through the warehouse speakers, the splintering crack of a door being kicked in, the metallic shk-shk of multiple weapons being readied, and a man's voice yelling, "Down, get down now." Riley's pulse exploded against her ribs. She was back at La Meridienne, the smell of cordite in her nostrils. Her knees felt weak. She wanted to run, to hide. The sound of her own breathing was deafening. No. She squeezed her eyes shut, shutting out the phantom images. She forced her mind away from the gunfire into the music that came before it. The saxophone. It was a slow ballad. She remembered. She found the beat in her memory. A simple 1, 2, 3, 4. She anchored herself to it. She began to count her breaths, matching the rhythm of the jazz tune. In for 4 beats, hold for 7 beats, exhale for 8 beats. The panic receded, forced down by the discipline of the count. The lights snapped back on. Bogdan was standing exactly where he had been, arms crossed. Sarah hadn't moved. Her heart rate elevated to 170, Bogdan observed, as if reading a report. But she controlled her breathing in 12 seconds. She did not bolt. He gave a curt nod. She is steady. Adrian appeared from a glass-walled office above them, descending the steel staircase slowly. "She is," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. He stopped in front of Riley. "Walk with me." He led her up the same stairs to the roof. The wind hit them instantly, a cold, wet blade carrying the smell of salt and diesel. The whole of Port Providence glittered below them, a sprawling kingdom of light and shadow. The massive container cranes, even at this hour, moved with a slow, deliberate grace, lifting and shifting giants. "Look," Adrian said. He pointed to the brightly lit southern terminals. "That is Pier 12. Textiles, electronics, automotive parts, clean, fast, and taxable. It is what the city sees." His hand moved, pointing to a dark, quiet stretch of the harbor, where old shipping lanes met forgotten inlets. "And that is where our other business is done. The places no one asks for papers. The places that built this city long before the FCCO existed." He was teaching her. showing her the true anatomy of his power. "You believe that's fair?" Riley asked, pulling her arms tight against the cold. "Fairness is a luxury, Riley," Adrian said, turning to face her. The wind whipped his dark hair. "I inherited a war. I choose to regulate the gray areas, not exploit them. My rules mean the dock workers get paid, their families are safe, and the worst kinds of cargo never make it ashore. I don't sell men into debt." "A gray road can still have white lines," she replied, her voice steady despite the wind. "Someone has to be willing to paint them." He stared at her, a long, searching look. Before he could answer, a high-pitched whine sliced the air. It was not the wind, a small, black drone, no larger than a dinner plate, rose up from the edge of the building. It hovered for a second, its single red camera lens aimed directly at them. A sharp crack echoed from the stairwell door. The drone exploded in a puff of plastic and circuitry. Bogdan lowered a scoped rifle, his face impassive. Minutes later, they were gathered around Sierra's workstation. She had already retrieved the drone's memory card. An image flashed on the main screen, a grainy but clear shot of Riley in the club. Her arm extended, Adrian's gun held steady, her face a mask of lethal focus. "Cassius," Sarah said, her voice tight. "He's not just marking her. He's building a narrative. He's circulating this to the other outfits, painting her as your new trigger. A professional assassin. He's trying to spook your allies." "It's a good play," Sarah continued, pacing. "It makes you look reckless. We need to counter it. We launch a diversion." She pulled up a map of the port. "We leak a rumor. We make it known that the Ferrum ring is overextended, that they are planning a desperate merger with the South Dock handlers. We make Cassius look frantic, not strategic. It will force him to move, and he'll make a mistake." Adrian's gaze shifted to Riley. "Sarah's plan is good, but you are the key. Cassius thinks you are my weapon. The FCCO thinks you are my accomplice. My own men," he gestured to Bogdan, "think you are a variable." He leaned in slightly. "I need you to be the one thing none of them expect, an outsider's eye. When Sarah leaks this information to my lieutenants, you will be in the room. You will watch. You don't know their histories, their loyalties, their tells. You will see what I can no longer see. Who glances at whom, who checks their phone, who reacts too quickly or too slowly. That is your purpose here." They were on the roof again, later, the sky turning a bruised purple before dawn. The wind was relentless, and Riley, still in her damp clothes, began to shiver. Adrian watched her for a beat, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he stripped off his heavy wool overcoat. The garment was dark, expensive, and warm from his own body. He didn't hand it to her. He stepped close and draped it over her shoulders. His fingers brushed the skin of her neck as he settled the heavy collar. The touch was fleeting, barely there, but it shot through her like electricity, a sudden, shocking warmth in the freezing air. Her breath caught. He smelled of coffee and the cold night. He stepped back, the distance between them restored. When Riley finally turned to go back inside, wrapped in his coat, she glanced back at the sprawling, sleeping city. She knew, with a sudden, heavy clarity, that from this moment on, every step she took was a footprint on wet sand. She was caught between two tides, and both were watching, waiting to pull her under. The industrial kitchen at the lampworks was vast and cold, a space built for efficiency, not comfort. It was long after midnight, and the rest of the warehouse was silent save for the howl of the storm outside. On a stainless steel prep table, a half-empty pot of pasta sat between them. They were eating with forks, a makeshift dinner of tomato and basil. The silence was thick, charged with the unsaid things from the rooftop. Adrian watched her. She ate with a deliberate focus, as if finishing the meal was a task to be completed. "Bogdan's test," he said, his voice quiet in the large room. "The audio simulation. You were terrified, but you didn't run." Riley paused, her fork hovering. She looked down at the pasta. "My mother taught me how to manage fear. She was an accountant, but she grew up on the docks. She always said, before you decide to shoot or to run, You count your own heartbeat. Count to 10. Slow. If your pulse is steady by the 10th beat, you're making a choice. If it's still racing, you're just panicking. She taught me to find the rhythm before making the move. He stopped eating. The guarded, calculating look he always wore, the look of the man who ran the port, seemed to recede. His gaze softened, not with pity, but with a profound, focused attention. He was truly seeing her, perhaps for the first time. As if her words had summoned it, the storm outside attacked with renewed fury. A gust of wind hit the building with the force of a solid blow. The long fluorescent lights over the prep station buzzed, flickered, and died. Total darkness fell, immediate and suffocating. A moment later, the emergency system engaged. A single blue-green safety light above the exit door clicked on, casting the room in a cold aquatic glow. It illuminated the mist of their breath in the chilled air and made the steel counters look like slabs of ice. They both stood instinctively, moving toward the massive, reinforced windows overlooking the harbor. The world outside was a chaos of black water and slashing rain. They stood side by side, shoulders almost touching, watching the distant, skeletal silhouettes of the cranes. Riley rested her hands on the cold steel counter. His hand was next to hers. Their wrists brushed. A simple, accidental contact. Neither of them pulled away. "Why didn't you run?" Adrian's voice was low, barely louder than the drumming rain. "Vale offered you a way out. Cassius sent his warning. You had the chance." Riley turned her head to look at him. The eerie blue light carved sharp shadows under his cheekbones, but his eyes were fixed on her. "I've spent my whole life staying hidden," she said, her voice quiet but vibrating with a sudden intensity. "My mother hid. She kept her head down, she played by the rules she was given, and in the end, it didn't save her. It just meant no one was there to tell her story." She met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm not running this time, because running just lets them write my story for me, and I'm tired of it." The admission hung in the air between them, raw and irreversible. The tension in the room coiled tight, a palpable thing. It was the rising of a tide in an enclosed space. He searched her face, seeing the exhaustion, the fear, and the unbending core of iron beneath it. He moved slowly, with a deliberate grace that belied the power in his frame. He lifted one hand. He didn't touch her face or her arm. He placed his hand on the back of her neck, his fingers gently tangling in the short hairs at her nape. His skin was warm against hers. It was not a gesture of possession, but a question. His thumb came to rest on the pulse point just beneath her ear, feeling the very heartbeat she had just spoken of. His dark eyes asked what his words did not. Her breath caught in her throat. She could have flinched, pulled away, broken the contact. It would have been the smart, safe thing to do. Instead, she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He leaned in. The first kiss was not a sudden claiming. It was a slow, careful exploration, a question and an answer in one. It was tentative, his lips brushing hers, testing. He tasted of black coffee and the storm. The rain hammered on the warehouse roof, a wild percussion, a rhythm for the world shifting on its axis. Riley's hands, which had been pressed flat against the cold steel, rose. They didn't wrap around his neck. They fisted in the material of his dark shirt, gripping him as if he were the only solid thing in the churning water. That was the only answer he needed. The kiss changed. The carefulness gave way to a sudden, startling depth. It was a release of all the tension, the fear, the isolation of the past 2 days. His other hand came up, cupping her jaw, tilting her face to his. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, a wild, frantic rhythm, but she wasn't panicking. His breath was warm, mixing with hers. They broke apart, but only by inches. They rested their foreheads together, breathing hard in the blue light. The world was just the sound of the rain and the feeling of his skin. "We save the rest," he whispered, his voice rough. "We save it for when it's safe." The main light snapped on, a sudden, blinding white that washed out the shadows and the intimacy. The kitchen was just a kitchen again. Sarah Halden stood by the main breaker panel, her expression as smooth and unreadable as ever. She gave no sign that she had seen them, no indication that they were standing too close, that Riley's cheeks were flushed and her hands were still clutching Adrian's shirt. "Apologies," Sarah said, her voice as crisp as the renewed light. "The backup generator has stabilized. We have a new problem, a potential leak." She walked forward, placing a thin file on the counter between them. A deliberate, separating motion. Adrian stepped back, his mask of command sliding back into place, though his eyes remained on Riley. The file held a single photo of a man in his late 60s, with silver hair and a charismatic smile. "Nikolai Dragan," Sarah said. "He was my predecessor. He was Adrian's mentor, his godfather, in the old world sense. When Adrian restructured the consortium, he cut Nikolai's traditional fees by 75%. Nikolai was dissatisfied. We now have reliable chatter that he has been in quiet contact with Cassius. He's attending the annual acquisitions gala at the Flow Museum tomorrow night," Sarah continued. "He'll feel secure there, surrounded by the city's elite. We need to confirm his allegiance." "Riley will go," Adrian said. Sarah's eyebrow twitched. "She's untrained. Adrian, that's a high-stakes environment." "She's unknown," he countered. "They're all watching my known assets. They're watching for you. They won't see her." He looked at Riley. "You'll be the outsider's eye again. You'll go as an assistant to a private art buyer we have on the books. You just watch. You listen. We'll feed a rumor about the South Dock merger. You just watch who Nikolai talks to after he hears it." The rest of the night was a blur of hurried preparations. Bogdan, all grim business, showed her how to conceal a pea-sized microphone inside an ornate hairpin. "You don't talk," he grunted. "You just listen. We hear everything you hear." Just before she was escorted to a small, secure room to get a few hours of sleep, Adrian stopped her. He held out a delicate, thin silver chain, a single, smooth, dark stone hung from it. "It looks like a simple necklace," he said, his voice low. "It's not. If you are in immediate danger, you touch the stone, twice. It sends a silent, coded vibration only to me." He stepped close to fasten it around her neck. His fingers were warm as they brushed her collarbone. She had to tilt her head up to let him. His gaze was intense, locked on hers. "You touch this," he said, his voice an absolute promise, "and I will find you, no matter where you are. Later, in the small Spartan room." Riley looked at her reflection in the mirror. The silver chain was cold against her skin. Her cheeks were still faintly flushed, but her eyes were not the eyes of the waitress from La Meridienne. They were calm, focused, and steady. She touched the stone at her throat. She knew she had just wagered her heart in the middle of a war. The Flow Museum was a cathedral of glass and steel, built to celebrate Port Providence's maritime history. Tonight, it was a sea of champagne and black ties. Massive, illuminated models of 19th century clipper ships hung from the ceiling, casting intricate shadows on the polished marble floor. The chatter of the city's elite echoed off the glass, a sharp, brittle sound. Riley Jenkins moved through the crowd, a ghost in a simple, perfectly tailored black dress. She was, for tonight, the anonymous assistant to a reclusive art collector, a role that gave her a clipboard and a reason to be ignored. Her hair was swept up. The pin Bogdan had given her nestled securely. The silver chain from Adrian was cold against her skin. She was handing a program to her boss when a voice, smooth as aged whiskey, cut through the noise beside her. "A long way from the service entrance, Miss Jenkins." Riley didn't startle. She turned slowly. Cassius Leone stood before her, immaculate in a tuxedo that probably cost more than her apartment. He smiled, but it was a smile that showed all its teeth, a blade disguised as courtesy. He held 2 flutes of champagne. "A beautiful shot," he said, his voice low, offering her one of the glasses. "Truly, wasted on a waitress." His dark eyes weren't admiring her, they were dissecting her. They scanned her face, her hair, and lingered for a fraction of a second on the dark stone at her throat. He was looking for the wire. "I don't drink on the job," Riley said, her voice even. A shame. Cassius took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving hers. Kovarik has expensive taste, in his help, at least. Before she could reply, a minor commotion broke the tension. An older man, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, had seemingly stumbled, bumping into Riley's boss and then into her. "Oh, dreadful apologies," the man said, his voice a charming, aristocratic rumble. It was Nikolai Dragan. He was flanked by a young, sharp-eyed woman in a legal-looking suit. "These floors are treacherous." "No harm done," Riley's boss, a man in on the plan, said smoothly. "Mr. Dragan, isn't it? I was just hearing the most fascinating rumor about the South Dock merger. It seems imminent." Nikolai's charming smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold for a split second. He laughed it off, a dismissive wave of his hand. "City gossip, my friend, nothing more." But as he turned to retrieve a dropped napkin, Riley saw it. His gaze flicked across the room, past the bar, and found a waiter holding a silver tray. The waiter, who she recognized from La Meridienne, nodded once. Nikolai had signaled him. Riley's eyes followed the waiter. On his lapel, where a name tag should be, was a small, burnished metal pin. It was shaped like an old-fashioned door latch, a contact marker. She scanned the room, her gaze moving quickly, professionally. She spotted two more on a security guard near the main doors and on a woman dripping with diamonds near the auction stage. Ferrum ring. They weren't just here, they owned the service staff. A text vibrated on the burner phone in her small clutch. A message from Sarah. Now. Riley leaned into her boss and whispered. He nodded, then turned back to the group, which Cassius had rejoined. "Well, if the South Dock is gossip," her boss said loudly, "then I suppose the rare materials shipment arriving at E12 tomorrow is just a fairy tale." It was a direct hit. Riley watched them both. The tells were instantaneous, perfect. Cassius's hand, the one holding the champagne, went to his left pinky, his thumb and forefinger unconsciously twisting the heavy gold ring he wore. A nervous tick, a confirmation. Nikolai's reaction was smoother, but just as damning. He smiled politely, raised a hand as if to check his tie, and pulled his phone from his inner pocket. Under the cover of the gesture, his thumb moved, firing off a text. He then excused himself, claiming a need to speak to the auctioneer, and walked briskly away. They were both in on it. Don't let him own your soul with his protection. The voice was a whisper, sharp and cold, directly in her ear. Riley turned. Agent Tamsin Vale was beside her, dressed as a wealthy patron, a program in her hand. Her smile was as thin and false as Cassius's. "You're a long way from the kitchen yourself, Agent," Riley murmured. "Kovarik's protection is just a different kind of cage," Vale said, her gaze fixed on the stage. "And on Ngia, a debt. It's how he keeps his assets. Don't become one." Before Riley could process the warning, a new sensation, a single, sharp vibration from the stone against her collarbone. One pulse. Contact. She tapped her hairpin. "The mic. Talk to me," she whispered. Turning away from Vale, Bogdan's voice was a gravelly buzz in her ear. "Rooftop access. North Terrace. 2 men, long gun cases, camera blind spots. This is a setup. Riley, Cassius isn't here to talk. He's flushing you. Get out. Now." Chaos. She needed chaos. She turned back, and Cassius was right there, his smile gone, his eyes now cold and assessing. He knew she was wired. "Something wrong, Miss Jenkins?" he purred. "You look rattled." Riley met his gaze. She took the champagne flute from his hand. "You're right," she said. "It's been a long night." And with a movement that looked like a genuine stumble, she twisted and tripped, throwing the entire glass of champagne directly onto the pristine white shirt of Cassius Leone. "Oh," she gasped, as he roared in surprise and cold shock. The entire circle jumped back. Waiters rushed forward. Her boss began apologizing profusely. It was all she needed, a half-second of pure, unadulterated distraction. While all eyes were on the mess, Riley spun on her heel and moved. She didn't run. She walked, fast and silent, slipping out of the main hall and into the dark, restricted corridor that led to the museum's archives. The sound of the party faded, replaced by the sharp, panicked click-clack-click of her own heels on the polished wood floor. Her heart beat in time with the sound. She found the door marked Port Authority Archives on loan and slipped the lock with a thin piece of plastic from her clutch. Inside, the room was dark, smelling of old paper and wood polish. She used the light from her burner phone. It was a room of maps. There, on a central table, laid out as if for review, was a detailed schematic of the entire Port Providence harbor. It was a modern port map, showing every terminal, every access road, and in the corner, a hand-drawn addendum, a plan. Red circles marked security blind spots, arrows indicated new routes, and in the bottom corner, two things. The initials CL in a sharp, arrogant script. And beneath it, a faint but unmistakable embossed stamp, the seal of the Eastern Regional Port Authority. Cassius didn't just have spies, he had a partner, someone inside the city government itself. She took 3 pictures with the phone. She pocketed it. She turned to leave. A dark shape filled the fire exit at the end of the hall. She froze, her hand flying to the stone at her neck. The figure stepped into the sliver of light from the exit sign. It was Adrian. He wasn't there to save her. He was her extraction. He said nothing, just held out his hand. She walked quickly, her heels silent now, and took it. His grip was hard, warm, and real. It was a solid anchor in the swirling chaos. The instant her fingers laced with his, a loud hiss came from the main hall, followed by screams. Security smoke, a diversion for the gunmen. "This way," Adrian said, pulling her through the exit door and into the concrete stairwell, just as the smoke alarms began to blare. The operations room at the lampworks was silent, lit only by the massive, glowing screen. Riley's photos from the museum archive were magnified. The seal of the Eastern Regional Port Authority, stark and undeniable. Sarah Halden stood at the head of the table, a remote in her hand, her face grim. Marcel Vane, Deputy Port Director. He's the government contact. She clicked, bringing up a diagram. The deal Cassius is offering is privatized port security. He promises Vane a cut of the contract and an end to the Kovaric problem. In return, Ferrum Ring gets to approve their own cargo manifests. They're not just taking a piece of the pie, they're stealing the entire kitchen. "They're moving too fast," Bogdan rumbled from the corner. "This isn't just Cassius. This is bigger." "It is," a new voice said. Agent Tamsin Vale stood in the main entrance, flanked by 2 other FCCO agents. She hadn't been invited, she had simply arrived. "And we're going to stop it. I need a word with Miss Jenkins, alone." The tension snapped tight. Adrian, who had been watching the screen with a dangerous stillness, turned his full attention to Vale. "Whatever you have to say to her, you say to all of us." This is an official federal matter. Mr. Kovaric," Vale said, her professional smile firmly in place. "Not a consortium meeting." She looked at Riley. "You're a witness. Riley, you're also, as of now, a person of interest in a multi-agency investigation. You need to choose your side. My office." Riley followed her to a small, glass-walled conference room. Vale didn't sit. She laid a file on the table. It was old, the manila folder soft at the edges. "Eleanor Jenkins," Vale said. "Your mother. The official story is that she was a key witness who died in a tragic accident before she could testify. The unofficial story, the one that lingers in the port's records, is that she was complicit in the original scandal, that she was taking bribes." "That's a lie," Riley said, her voice a low hiss. "I know it is," Vale said, her tone softening for the first time. "But it's the version of the story that's still on the books. Her file is still open. Her reputation still tarnished. You help me, and I will personally close it. I'll have her record expunged. I'll issue a formal commendation for her cooperation. Help you how? You're inside, Vale said, leaning in. Cassius thinks you're a target. Adrian thinks you're an asset. They're both wrong. You're my mole. We need a mole inside the mole. We need to know what Kovarik plans to do to counter this, and we need to be there when he does it. Adrian was in the doorway before Vale finished. Absolutely not. Get out! This is her choice. Kovarik, Vale snapped back. Not yours. You're offering her a cage. I'm offering her a clean slate. Her mother's clean slate. Adrian looked at Riley, his face a mask of controlled fury. He was angry at Vale for the offer, but he was also terrified of what Riley would choose. Riley, in turn, looked at the file with her mother's name. She was trapped between the man who had her future and the woman who held her past. She took a breath, finding the rhythm her mother had taught her. I'll do it, she said. Adrian's face hardened. Vale's expression was triumphant. But, Riley continued, looking directly at Vale, on my terms, not yours. I will give you information. I will not plant evidence. I will not entrap anyone. And any action I take, or any information I provide, cannot be used if it results in the death or injury of a civilian. Any civilian, no collateral damage. This isn't a negotiation, Miss Jenkins, Vale began. Yes, it is, Riley said, her voice as hard as the steel tables in the kitchen. Those are my terms. You'll sign an internal memorandum of understanding to that effect. That's ridiculous. That's not how we... Then I walk, Riley said, and you get nothing, and I'll find another way to clear my mother's name. Vale stared at her, a long, calculating look. The waitress was gone. This was someone else. Fine, Vale bit out. I'll have the memo drawn up, but you're on a very short leash. The next day, a handwritten note arrived, delivered by a messenger. The paper was thick, creamy, and expensive. The handwriting was an elegant, old-world script. It was an invitation for Riley to have tea at the Salt Line Conservatory, a massive, city-owned greenhouse complex, to discuss our mutual friend. It was signed Nikolai Dragan. Sarah was tactical. It's a trap, obviously, but it's also an opportunity. He wants to talk to you, not us. He feels he can turn you. She pulled up a schematic of the conservatory. We'll put 2 sniper teams on the roof of the adjoining botanical center. Bogdan will have a 3-man team in the service tunnels. You will be wired for audio and video. Adrian hated it. He paced the operations room. I should be there. If he's making a move, I should be the one to meet him. No, Sarah said, her voice firm. You are the one person who cannot be there. Your presence would escalate it from a meeting to a confrontation. He's testing your control, and he's testing her loyalty. She has to go in alone. That's the entire point. The Salt Line Conservatory was suffocatingly hot and damp. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and blooming, overly sweet orchids. The glass roof filtered the afternoon sun, making the light green and sickly. Nikolai Dragan was waiting for her at a small iron table, a silver tea service between them. Miss Jenkins, he said, rising with a smile that was both fatherly and predatory. Thank you for coming. Please. He poured the tea. I will not waste your time with pleasantries, he said, settling back in his chair. You have found yourself in the middle of a war you do not understand. Cassius Leone, the Ferrum Ring. They are nothing. They are a symptom, a loud, violent, and frankly, clumsy front. He leaned forward. The real power is an entity called the Hurricane Safe, a cartel that runs from the Gulf Coast to the Canadian border. They don't just want a piece of Port Providence. Miss Jenkins, they want to swallow it whole. They want a ghost port, a private shipping lane for their, shall we say, unregulated goods. Cassius is just their bulldog, hired to break down the door. Riley's blood ran cold. This was infinitely bigger than a turf war. And you, she asked, her voice steady. I am a businessman, Nikolai said. Adriana, he's like a son to me, but he is sentimental. He clings to the docks, to the workers. He doesn't see the global picture. The hurricane safe will win. It is inevitable. I am simply arranging the terms of our survival." "What terms?" "I will sell you Cassius," Nikolai said simply. "I will deliver him to Adrian, on a platter. It will end the violence. In exchange, I resume my old position as his advisor. The consortium remains, but under my guidance, it finds a new accommodation with the safe." He smiled. "And you, my dear, you will be the bond that seals the peace, a safe, protected, and very comfortable position as a guarantee of Adrian's good behavior." A hostage. He meant she would be his hostage. Riley watched him. As he spoke of Adrian, his expression was a toxic mix. There was the pride of a mentor, but it was curdled by the sharp, bitter envy of a man who had been replaced. It was the deep, sour smell of a betrayal that had been festering for years. "So," she said, "you'd sell him out to Anna." She never finished. A loud hiss echoed from the rear service entrance, then another from the main doors. Thick, white smoke began to pour into the greenhouse, obscuring the exits. "He's early," Nikolai hissed, grabbing his coat. Shouting erupted. Men in black tack gear, Ferrum ring markings, burst through the smoke. It was Cassius, attacking the meeting, cutting off both his allies and his enemies. Riley saw a young conservatory employee, a kid in a green polo, freeze in terror by a bank of ferns. The first gunman raised his rifle. Riley moved. She didn't go for a weapon. She lunged, grabbing the employee by his shirt and hauling him bodily behind a massive stone planter. "Stay down, don't move." She came up as a second gunman rounded the planter. He saw her. His eyes wide with surprise, he swung his gun. Riley moved inside his reach, her hand grabbing his rifle barrel and yanking it down. At the same time, her other hand shot out, palm heel striking his wrist. A sickening snap echoed in the humid air. The man screamed, his grip broken. The rifle clattered to the tile floor. She kicked it away, just as a third man appeared. It was over in seconds. Her moves were clean, precise, and defensive. She didn't kill. She disarmed. She disabled. Through the clearing smoke, she saw Nikolai scrambling out a broken side window. He was gone. The operation was a bust. Vale's hidden micro-cameras, planted in the orchids, had recorded the whole thing. They had captured Riley's takedown, the clean, harmless wrist break, the disarming, the absolute lack of lethal force. It was undeniable proof. She was no assassin. Bogdan's team swarmed in, securing the disarmed men. Riley stood, breathing heavily, her heart pounding, on the iron table, where Nikolai had been sitting, was the only thing he had left behind. A silver Zippo lighter, elegantly engraved with the initials ND. It wasn't a mistake. It was a challenge. The door to the main operations room slid open, and Riley stepped in. It was past 3 a.m. The adrenaline from the conservatory had long since faded, leaving a deep, aching exhaustion. The fight, brief as it was, had left its mark. A long, angry red scratch ran from her jawline down her neck, where the gunman's rifle strap had snagged her. Adrian was waiting, alone. He saw the mark instantly. The air left his lungs in a silent rush. He said nothing, but walked to a steel medical cabinet, retrieved a first aid kit, and motioned her to a chair under a bright task light. He was all business, his movements clipped and precise. He tore open an antiseptic wipe, but when he reached for her, his hand was not steady. His fingers, calloused and sure, trembled for a single, fractional beat as they brushed the skin next to the raw wound. A tiny bead of dried blood flaked away under his touch. "I promised I would keep you safe," he said. The voice was not his. It was a low, guttural sound, ripped from him, vibrating with a self-loathing that stunned her. Riley didn't flinch from his touch, or his anger. She met his dark eyes, her own gray gaze clear and steady. "I chose to stand with you." It was not an absolution. It was a statement of fact, and it was the thing that broke him. The words were a storm contained in a glass, and the glass had just shattered. He didn't lean in. He pulled her up from the chair and into him, his hands grabbing her, one at her waist, the other tangling in her hair. It was not gentle or romantic. It was desperate. It was the drowning grip of a man who had just seen the thing he valued most, nearly swept away. Riley's response was just as fierce. She didn't melt. She held on, her arms wrapping tightly around him, her hands fisted in the back of his shirt. This was not a fantasy. It was not a rescue. It was two people anchoring each other in the middle of a collapsing building. He kissed her, and it was as raw as the wound on her neck. It was deep and searching and filled with all the things they could not say: his fear, her defiance, their shared isolation. His lips were hard, then softened, hers parted, a silent admission. It was not a single kiss, but a series of them, broken and resumed, breath-catching, foreheads pressing together in the spaces between. She slid one hand from his back to his chest, pressing her palm flat against his shirt, over his heart. She needed to feel it. The heavy, frantic, thud-thud-thud beneath her hand was a counter-rhythm to the chaos, a confirmation that this was real. They broke apart, but did not let go. He led her to a long, low sofa by the dark, rain-lashed windows. They sat, their shoulders, hips, and knees pressed together. The storm outside was a distant roar. Riley leaned her head, heavy with exhaustion, into the crook of his neck. She closed her eyes. He smelled of sea salt, warm metal, and clean cotton. He felt solid. For a long time, he said nothing. He just held her, one arm securely around her, his hand resting on her uninjured side. When he finally spoke, his voice was a whisper. Not for the boss of the consortium, but for her. "They have all said yes to me my entire life," he murmured against her hair. "Yes, boss. Yes, Mr. Kovarik, yes, sir. I am surrounded by it. It's a wall. I'm terrified," he admitted, the words sounding foreign and rough, "of losing the only person in a decade who has had the courage to say no to my face." Riley tilted her head, looking up at him. He was not looking at her, but out at the dark, churning water of the port. "Then we make a rule," she said, her voice quiet but firm. He met her gaze. "A rule. We will not use each other as painkillers for someone else's war." He studied her face, seeing the iron will that had pulled her through every test he and his world had thrown at her. He nodded slowly. "A rule." The calm was shattered by the 8 a.m. sun and Sarah Halden. She entered the operations room, where Adrian and Riley sat apart, drinking coffee, the night's truce put away. Sarah's face was pale. "He's moving," she said, without preamble. "Marcel Vane is signing the private port security initiative with Ferrum Ring. It's not a backroom deal. It's a public ceremony. Marina Crest Hall, tomorrow night." "He's that arrogant," Adrian said, rising. "He's that protected," Sarah countered. "He's wrapping it in civic duty, cleaning up the ports. Once that signature is dry, Cassius has legal authority over the docks, our docks. The port falls." The room was silent. "Then we light a fire on both sides of him," Adrian said. "Sarah, you leaked the rare materials shipment again, this time a hard manifest. Pier E12, tomorrow, 1 hour before the signing, a massive diversion to pull Cassius's men." And Vane Bogdan asked, stepping into the room. "We turn his public ceremony into a public execution," Adrian said. "We'll set up a counter press conference. We'll anonymously tip the Coastal Integrity Bureau about his financial ties to a hostile entity. They can't ignore a public accusation." "It's not enough," Riley said. All three of them looked at her. "It's a good plan," she said, standing. "But Cassius is arrogant, not stupid. He'll leave his best men at the hall to guard Vane. He's fixated on me. He thinks I'm your weapon. He's expecting me to be hidden." She took a breath. "So I'm not. I'll walk right in the front door. Be the firepower magnet. He won't be able to resist. He'll focus on me, not the CIB. It will buy your plan the time it needs." "No," Adrian said. It was immediate, flat, and absolute. "It's a suicide mission." It's the only move he won't see coming, she argued, stepping toward him. You needed an outsider's eye. Now you need a lightning rod. It's the same play. They stared at each other, a silent, furious battle of wills. Finally, Adrian looked away. His jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped. Bogdan will outfit you. You will not be alone, but you will be visible. He took the dark stone necklace from his pocket. 2 vibrations, he said, his voice hard. Not 1, 2. That's the by any means necessary signal. You use it and my team extracts you. I don't care if the entire hall is on fire. Understood. Understood. An hour before they were set to leave, Agent Vale found Riley alone. She handed her a slim leather wallet. Inside was a temporary FCCO badge. This will get you backstage. My team will be there, posing as media. Thank you, Riley said. Don't thank me, Vale said, her eyes cold. Pay me. I want the recording. Kovarik's alliance with the Port Authority, the one that lets him run his gray areas. I need it. Riley, it's the price for the badge. Riley looked at the badge, the key to the entire operation. She thought of Vale's offer to clear her mother's name. She thought of Adrian's hand trembling as he cleaned her wound. She closed the wallet and handed it back to Vale. No, Riley said. Vale was stunned. What after everything? I'm not your mole, agent. I'm your partner. I'm going in there to stop Vane. Your team will have to be satisfied with that. She held Vale's gaze. My trust is not for sale. She took her own badge, the temporary one Sierra had made, and walked away. The black sedan idled at the Lampworks exit, the engine a low thrum. Adrian stopped her at the door, the rest of the team already outside. Riley, he said, his voice a low whisper. If I fall, if I go down, you do not stop. You get out. You run. That is an order. She looked at him, at the man who ran the port, the man who was terrified of losing, the man who had whispered his fears to her in the dark. If you fall, Riley replied, her voice just as quiet, but with a core of unbending steel. I will pull you up, then I'll get out. She turned and walked to the car. Marina Crest Hall was a supernova of light, a frantic ocean of flashbulbs, crystal and nervous chatter, real journalists and fake ones, hired by Sierra, mingled in a single, tense mass. Riley Jenkins walked through the main doors, not as a waitress, not as an assistant, but as herself. Her presence was a rumor given flesh. She was a walking declaration of war. On the balcony overlooking the main floor, Cassius Leone watched her entrance over the rim of a champagne flute. He squinted. She wasn't hiding in the shadows. She was walking down the center aisle. He smiled, a thin, sharp expression. She's arrogant, he murmured to his guard. Miles away, in the pulsing dark of the Lampworks, Sarah Halden hit the enter key. The forged shipping manifest, detailing a massive, high-priority shipment of rare materials, was instantly routed to a compromised terminal operator at Pier E12. The bait is in the water, she said, her voice echoing in the vast, empty room. The phone in Cassius's pocket vibrated. He read the text. E12. The shipment was real. He looked down at Riley, then across the room at Marcel Vane, who was sweating as he approached the podium. The timing was an insult, a blatant diversion. He's splitting my forces, Cassius hissed. He made the calculation. Send the main team. All of them. Lock down that pier. It's the only thing that matters. Vane is safe here. He looked at his remaining security. No one touches Kovarik's woman until Vane signs. Then she's a bonus. He had made his choice, sacrificing his tactical advantage in the hall for the strategic prize at the port. Bogdan's voice was a low growl in Adrian's earpiece. He took it. The convoy is moving. 3 heavy vehicles heading south. He's left the hall thin. Boss, just a skeleton crew. Down on the floor, Agent Tamsin Vale saw her opening. She moved with the fluid grace of a shark, intercepting Marcel Vane just steps from the stage. She held open a thin federal file, shielding its contents from the cameras with her body. Racketeering, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the city, she whispered. her smile fixed and pleasant for the reporters. "You sign that document, Mr. Vane, and I promise you will spend the next 20 years in a federal prison." Vane's face went a sickly shade of gray. He could feel the eyes of Cassius's men on him from the balcony. He could feel the cold steel of the federal government in Vale's voice. You have no authority here," he stammered, his hand shaking. "This is a city matter." He tried to push past her. Riley was moving toward the press row when a familiar, elegant figure blocked her path. Nikolai Dragon, his silver hair was immaculate. "The hour of choice, Miss Jenkins," he whispered, his smile laced with a strange pity. "Cassius or Adrian, who are you really saving tonight?" "Now," Cassius ordered from the balcony. A new sound filled the hall, not a gunshot, but the high-pitched electric whine of multiple motors. A choir of 10 small, black drones lifted into the air from the side alcoves. They hovered above the stunned crowd, the massive video screens behind the podium, meant for Vane's presentation, flickered to life. It was Riley. At La Meridienne, the video was grainy, a high-contrast nightmare. It was edited with vicious, rapid cuts. It showed her arm extended, the muzzle flash, the man's gun flying. It did not show the man aiming first. It did not show the guard falling. It was a lie, perfectly crafted to look like a cold-blooded, professional assassination. The crowd gasped. A woman screamed, "It's the assassin, she's here. That's her." This was the play. The crowd began to surge away from Riley, a wave of panic and accusation. She saw Vane, panicked by the noise, lunging for the podium and the pen. She saw Vale's CIB team, stuck in the bottleneck at the main doors. Riley moved. She vaulted the velvet rope, shoved past a startled councilman, and grabbed the microphone from the podium. "My name is Riley Jenkins," she shouted. Her voice, amplified, boomed through the hall, shaky but powerful, cutting through the rising panic. "That video is a lie." All cameras, all eyes swiveled to her. "I was a waitress at La Meridienne she continued, her heart hammering against her ribs, her voice gaining strength. "Cassius Leone's men were there to execute Adrian Kovarik. I saw a gun. I acted. I disarmed a killer. I did not take a life." The crowd paused, caught between the two narratives. The live stream cameras zoomed in, catching the raw, terrified, and defiant honesty in her eyes. "Push it," Vale snapped to her tech agent. "Push the real one. Now." The feed on the main screen suddenly split. Riley's face, tight and fierce, was on one side. On the other, a new video played. It was the original, unedited security footage from the club's main camera. It clearly showed the gunman bursting in, the first shot, and Riley's desperate, defensive action, the truth, inarguable. On the balcony, Cassius roared in pure rage. The narrative was lost. "Sniper, take her, now." Adrian, standing near the sound booth, was watching Riley, his face a mask of terror and burning pride. "Reflection roof," Bogdan's voice yelled in Adrian's earpiece. A split second before he materialized, Bogdan was a solid wall of muscle, shoving Adrian hard, bodily, to the ground. Crack! A high-velocity round smashed into the steel support pillar exactly where Adrian's head had been. Plaster and metal fragments exploded outward. The crowd, which had been confused, now screamed in genuine terror and dove for the floor. In the chaos, Nikolai grabbed Riley's arm, his grip like a vice. "You see," he hissed, pulling her toward a side exit. "He can't protect you. Cassius is a rabid dog, but the hurricane's safe. They are the plague. I was trying to save Adrian from them. I was giving him a path to surrender, to live. He's too proud." Riley finally understood. Nikolai wasn't betraying Adrian for power. He was betraying him out of fear. He wanted Adrian to win this small battle, but only to force him into a larger, more permanent debt. A debt to Nikolai, the man who saved him from the safe. The price wasn't blood. It was chains. Marcel Vane saw his moment, in the panic, under the cover of the sniper shot. He lunged for the table and the document. His pen touched the paper. CIB, nobody move. The main doors burst open. Uniformed Coastal Integrity Bureau officers, led by a triumphant Agent Vale, swarmed the stage. 2 officers grabbed Vane, hauling him back from the table, his pen skittering across the floor. "Marcel Vane, you are under arrest." Vane was cuffed, the flashbulbs of the real press corps exploding in his face. On the balcony, Cassius saw it all collapse, the signing, the hit, the video. He smashed his glass against the railing. "Back to the port," he roared to his men. "Back to the fallback E-12, he vanished. Adrian and Bogdan regrouped with Riley in the screaming chaos of the lobby. "It's not over," Adrian said, his voice hard as iron. "He's retreating to his main force. At Crane 27, he'll dig in." "Boss, we pull out," Bogdan said. "We let the CIB handle the rest." "No," Adrian said. "The CIB won't go in. This is our fight. We end it." He looked at Riley. "Go with Sarah's escort. Get to the safe house. That's an order." "No," Riley said, her voice flat, breathing hard. "Riley, damn it." "I'm not on your payroll, Adrian," she shot back. "I grew up delivering parts in that yard. I worked graveyard shifts at the E-12 commissary. I know the shortcuts. I know the container alleys and the service tunnels that aren't on any map. You go in with Bogdan's men. You're going in blind. You go in with me. You have a guide." Adrian's phone vibrated. A text from Sarah. "Intel confirms. Hurricane Safe has a heavy lift ferry departing the Gulf Stream. They're sending reinforcements. ETA 60 minutes. 60 minutes? Adrian looked at Riley, at the unbending steel in her eyes. He nodded. "Once." "Bogdan, get the vehicles." The wind from the harbor, even this far inland, howled through the steel canyons of the city. It sounded like a choir, tuning for a finale. Pier E-12 was a city built from steel boxes, lit by the sick, buzzing yellow of high-pressure sodium lamps. The rain turned the air into a golden haze. Cassius had crafted a fortress here, a maze of shipping containers stacked 5 and 6 high, their corrugated sides forming narrow, claustrophobic canyons, and from loudspeakers mounted on the light poles, a sound drifted over the noise of the wind and water, the low, smoky tenor sax from La Meridienne. The exact tune that had played the moment before the first shot was fired. It was a soundtrack for a burial, a final, arrogant mockery. Miles away, in the dark heart of the lampworks, Sarah Halden was a ghost in the code, coordinating the unseen pieces. Her voice was a calm, steady presence in Adrian's earpiece. "Bogdan's team is in the water, blocking the slip exit. Our local assets have the road gates sealed. The CIB is holding a perimeter half a mile out. Agent Vale is officially observing, which means she's waiting for us to finish the dirty work so she can claim the win. Inside this box, we are alone." Riley led, her movements sure and silent. She didn't hesitate. Weaving through the gaps in the steel labyrinth, this was her old world. "This way," she whispered, touching a small, faded chalk symbol on the base of a dark blue container, a crescent moon. "It's an old marker for the night shift commissary deliveries." She was following a breadcrumb trail she had left for herself years ago. Cassius had built a maze, but Riley knew the shortcuts. The trail ended in a wide, circular clearing, walled on all sides by red containers. In the center, dwarfed by the skeletal immensity of Crane 27. Cassius Leone waited. He was not alone. "The prodigal son," Cassius sneered as Adrian and Riley stepped into the light. "And his pet assassin, you've cost me a great deal, Kavarik, but I am a reasonable man." He gestured, as if he were a king holding court. "I have a new offer. The hurricane safe doesn't care about your blood. They just want the port. You concede the South Dock, and I let you walk away. A retirement." His gaze shifted to Riley, hot and assessing. "Well, almost. Give me her and the South Dock as a gesture of goodwill, and you can keep your father's crumbling business." Adrian didn't just refuse. He laughed, a short, cold, humorless sound. "No." Riley stepped forward, moving out from behind Adrian's shadow. She stood in the open, her small frame rigid, a living blade caught between two warring forces. "I am not property," she said, her voice clear and sharp, ringing off the metal walls. "I am not a piece of land you get to trade." As she spoke, her gaze traveled up, past Cassius's smug face, following the steel lattice of the massive crane into the darkness above. The wind was strong up there, making the heavy cables whine. Her eyes caught something, near the main pulley block, high above their heads, nestled against the primary axle. A bundle of wires, a small, blinking red light, almost lost in the overwhelming yellow glare. Her blood turned to ice. It wasn't a fallback position. It was a failsafe, a bomb. "Adrian," she whispered, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "The crane. It's rigged." She understood. This was the Hurricane Safe's real plan. If Cassius won, they got the port. If Cassius lost, he would trigger the explosives. Crane 27, one of the largest on the eastern seaboard, would collapse. It would destroy the pier, the evidence, and everyone on it, Ferrum, Ring, and Kovarik's team, all buried together under 10,000 tons of twisted steel. A tragic industrial accident. Gunfire erupted. Cassius's men weren't aiming at them. They were aiming at the ladder. "The music!" Riley yelled as the saxophone began its final crescendo. "It's a timer, buy me time." She didn't wait for a reply. She sprinted for the service ladder on the crane's enormous leg. Bullets sparked against the steel inches from her hands. Adrian and his men returned fire, the sound of the battle a deafening percussion. Riley climbed. The wind tore at her, a physical force trying to rip her from the rungs. She climbed past the operator's cab, higher and higher into the skeletal framework, the rain lashing her face. She reached the pulley block, her muscles screaming. The charge was crude, but powerful. Her hands were shaking. Not panic, she thought, choice. She heard her mother's voice, a memory from a panicked childhood night. Find the rhythm, breathe. She forced her lungs to obey. In for 4 beats, hold for 7, exhale for 8. The chaos below faded. The world narrowed to the blinking light and the bundle of wires. Her shaking hands became steady. She found the primary detonator cap. With a firm, steady pull, she ripped the wires free. The red light died. On the ground, the fight was over. It had been brutal, fast and decisive. Adrian moved through the remaining gunmen, his focus singular, Cassius. The two men met in the center of the clearing. Cassius was all rage, a wild haymaker. Adrian was all control. He parried the blow, stepped inside Cassius's guard, and delivered a short, punishing series of blows. Cassius staggered, gasping. "This is my port," Adrian said, his voice low and cold as he deflected the last, desperate swing. "You chose to burn the pier. I choose to keep the shore." He drove his elbow into Cassius's jaw, and the man crumpled. Silence. The music stopped. The only sound was the wind. A touching sentiment. The voice was elegant, familiar, and laced with regret. Nikolai Dragan stepped from the shadows of a container, a silver pistol held steady in his hand. He was aiming directly at Adrian. "You won, my boy," Nikolai said, his smile laced with a strange pity. "But you won the wrong war. The Hurricane Safe will never forgive this. You have doomed us all." He raised the pistol. "I have to fix this. Correct the historical record. Show them. I am still in control." He was going to execute Adrian. Riley, halfway down the ladder, saw it happen. She was too far. "Adrian!" She didn't have time to climb. She let go. She dropped the last 15 feet, hitting the wet steel deck in a bone-jarring roll, the pain exploding in her knees and shoulder. She ignored it. She launched herself forward, a desperate flying tackle, slamming into Adrian's side. She hit him a fraction of a second before Nikolai fired. The gunshot was deafening. The bullet, meant for Adrian's heart, tore through the air where he had just been. It found Riley instead. A white-hot agony exploded in her left shoulder, spinning her around. They crashed to the cold, wet deck together. Riley cried out, a sharp, choked gasp. Adrian rolled, his body instantly shielding hers, his face a mask of pale terror. He saw the blood, dark, almost black, blooming on the shoulder of her jacket. "No, Riley, no!" He hauled her against him, his hand clamping down hard on the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. The wail of approaching sirens finally cut through the wind. He pressed his forehead to hers, his lips brushing her skin, his entire body trembling. "When this is over," Adrian whispered, his voice thick and raw, a promise made in the middle of a battlefield. "This is done. I will not let you pay my price ever again." Heavy boots thundered on the steel. Bogdan's team swarmed Nikolai. Kicking the pistol from his hand, Cassius was hauled to his feet, his hands bound. Then the blue lights washed over them. The CIB, led by Agent Vale, finally took control of the scene. Vale stood apart, her coat flapping, watching as Bogdan's men formally handed their prisoners over to her agents. She watched Adrian carefully lift Riley into his arms. Her face was a mask of cold calculation. She did not say a word. The morning sun broke over Port Providence, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and watery gold. The city woke up to a reality that had been rewritten in the dark. The front page of the Port Providence Chronicle, fed by a triumphant Coastal Integrity Bureau press release, screamed the headline, "Vicious Port Privatization Plot Foiled." The story detailed a daring CIB operation that had, with the help of federal partners, exposed Deputy Director Marcel Vane and dismantled the violent Ferrum ring. Cassius Leone was in custody, his charges cleverly filed under the Local Commerce and Trade Act, burying him in a mountain of non-violent, financial crimes that would keep him locked away for decades. In a sterile white room at the FCCO field office, Agent Tamsin Vale slid a folder across a table to Riley. "The Witness Protection Program," Vale said. "New name, new city, new life. We can have you on a plane in 4 hours. It's the cleanest way." Riley looked at the folder. She thought of her apartment, her mother's photo, the smell of the docks. She thought of a life spent looking over her shoulder. She slid the folder back across the table. "I'm not disappearing. Agent, I'm not running. I want to work in the open." Vale studied her, then nodded, a small, tight smile playing on her lips. "I thought you might say that." She slid a second object across the table, a small, encrypted data drive. "From the conservatory cameras, the takedown, and your climb up the crane, you disarming the bomb." Vale's expression was uncharacteristically soft. A hero doesn't need a weapon to kill. They just need the courage to stop an explosion. Across the city, at the lampworks, Adrian Kovarik was making his own concessions. He sat at a polished table, not with his men, but with the new CIB director and a city official. He was agreeing to the terms Riley had set from the beginning, a 60% reduction of the consortium's unregulated shipping lanes, a new, binding safety accord with the CIB, standardizing all B-roll and container handling, and the public establishment of a $5 million labor compensation fund for injured dock workers. It was not a surrender. It was a new set of rules. Out on the water, a CIB cutter intercepted a small tugboat slipping out toward the open sea. They found Nikolai Dragan sitting on the deck, sipping tea. His hands were perfectly steady. He did not resist as they cuffed him. He merely looked back at the port, his gaze distant, and clicked his silver N.D. Lighter, open and closed. It was the smile of a man who knew he would no longer be writing history, but would instead be a footnote in it. That evening, Riley stood on the roof of the lampworks. The wind was cold, but the rain had stopped. Her left shoulder was tightly bandaged under her sweater, a dull, heavy ache. The door opened. Adrian walked out, his steps slow, almost hesitant. He was late. He was holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He stopped a few feet from her, his gaze locked on the white bandage. He held out one of the mugs. "Sarah tells me you're enrolling in night classes, safety logistics." "If I'm going to be here," Riley said, taking the mug, her fingers brushing his. I need to understand the system, to protect it. From the inside, he finished for her. He looked out at the lights of the cranes, moving in their slow, endless dance. I spoke to the city college. I'm funding an anonymous scholarship program for dock workers, effective immediately. They stood in silence, the steam from their coffee rising into the cold night air. This, he said, his voice quiet, was never supposed to be your fight. I brought this storm to you, Riley. She turned to face him fully. I was born in the storm, Adrian. You just taught me how to stand in it. He set his coffee down. He took hers and set it down beside his. He stepped close, his hands coming up, not to grab, but to rest gently on her waist. He was asking permission. She leaned into his touch, her own hands finding their place on his chest, feeling the steady, calm beat of his heart. What you said on the pier, she whispered, about not paying your price. I meant it, he said, his voice raw. He looked down at her, his gaze intense, tracing the line of her face as if memorizing it. No more deals, no more bargains. He paused, searching for the right words. This isn't a proposal. It's a commitment. 2 people, one shore. She smiled, a slow, genuine smile that finally reached her eyes. I can live with that. He lowered his head. The kiss was not like the one in the kitchen, born of desperation and rain. This was slow and deep and certain. It was a promise. His hands slid from her waist, one moving up to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair, the other tracing the line of her uninjured shoulder. His touch infinitely gentle. Her breath hitched, mingling with his. His coat fell open, and she pressed closer, seeking his warmth. They kissed for a long time, a slow, unfolding conversation that needed no words. The tension of the last week, the fear, the adrenaline, it all dissolved, leaving only the solid, undeniable truth of them. The early morning sun began to edge the horizon, casting a pale golden light across their faces. They finally broke apart, but stayed close, foreheads resting together. His thumbs traced the line of her cheekbones. They smiled, a shared, quiet understanding. The passion had settled, the wildness tamed, leaving a space for their whispered words to finally find a home. Far below, in the street. Agent Tamsin Vale watched the 2 small figures on the roof. She saw the silhouettes draw together, then finally part. She lowered her phone. She had her victory. Vane was arrested, the Ferrum ring was broken, and the Hurricane Safe's entry to the port had been cauterized. She looked up at the roof one last time, at the man and the woman looking out at the new day. They're writing their own rules, she murmured to herself. She turned, her coat flapping, and walked away, leaving them to their dawn. The sea still churned, the great cranes still turned. Port Providence went on, but it had a new pair of eyes watching its coast, a pair that never closed when the rain began to fall. And when the new generation of gunmen and power brokers met in shadowed rooms to draw their own plans, the story, the legend, would always begin the same way. They say the boss was surrounded that night, until the waitress grabbed his gun and fired first. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We'd love to know where you're listening from, so please drop a comment below. Share your thoughts and let's connect. Please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. If you enjoyed this story, you can support us even more by hitting that hype button to help it reach more listeners.